Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week. And as soon as I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Last week was about half the length of my normal breach video, so I guess the criminals were on summer vacation here, or spring break, or something like that. They are back from their vacations because this week is nuts. And before I begin, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me, linked me, tagged me, whatever it was, to get me a lot of these breaches. It is always, always appreciated. And that is David Walker, Jason Dance, Barrett Peterson, Christopher Gay, Chris Fellon, and Jacqueline Wolf. Thank you again. And let's dive right in because, man, this week is crazy. First, we're going to be talking about guns.com, a uniquely American site where I think you can figure out what they do there. Now, back in January, basically somebody temporarily disabled, an attacker temporarily disabled the company's website, interfering with the site's retail operations and forcing guns.com to apologize to its basically confused customers through that whole thing. Now, guns.com had claimed that this attack was meant to prevent the, quote, business from operating, and that there was no indication of any attempt to steal data. However, that assessment appears to be wrong because this past week, a large cache of files allegedly taken from the site appeared on a popular dark web forum known as Raid Forums. In fact, an anonymous user offered guns.com's entire data set, allegedly everything from troves of consumer and administrative data to the site's stolen source code for free to anybody who wanted to download it. And we are talking about user IDs, full names, email addresses, phone numbers, hash passwords, and most alarmingly, physical addresses, including city, state, and zip code information. Obviously, if you've got an account there, odds are you've got a firearm, and now somebody knows where that firearm lives. That obviously is deeply concerning, not just to the gun owners, but obviously to law enforcement and society as well. So heads up to you if you use guns.com. Moving on, let's talk about the insurance giant CNA. They suffered a ransomware attack with a new variant called the Phoenix Crypto Locker that is possibly linked to the Evil Corp hacking group. They were hit so deep that basically the attackers were also able to encrypt the computers of employees working remotely who were logged in through the company's VPN during the time of attack. So obviously that's a huge, huge problem, and hopefully CNA will get back on their feet. Moving on. Let's talk about Manga Decks, which is basically a website for Japanese comics. Apparently they translate these from Japanese to English from what I've read. They temporarily shut down after suffering a cyber attack and having their source code stolen. Now, Manga Decks is the 179th most frequently visited website on the entire internet with over 76 million monthly visitors. So this is obviously a huge thing. Now, after suffering a series of outages on March 17th and recurring after that, Manga Decks revealed the other day that the threat actor had also gained access to an admin and developer account, as well as the source code to the site. Manga Decks stated that all users should assume that their data has been exposed. So if you're one of the monthly 76 million users of this site, Manga Decks, heads up, you might want to change your passwords. Moving on, let's give you guys an update on Excellion. This is the company with that file transfer system. They got a lot of large corporations and institutions hit and they're all declaring, and this week is no different because energy giant Shell, you may have filled up at a Shell station here in the United States, your car, they are declaring because of Excellion. The University of Miami is all now declaring because of Excellion, and an update to Flagstar Bank, who disclosed 2 weeks ago. Flagstar is now admitting that the hackers apparently access social security numbers, which is a detail they did not publicly disclose 2 weeks ago, and so it's getting worse for Flagstar. Heads up, Flagstar users. And those are your Excellion updates of the week. And moving on, let's talk about a company called Backblaze. If you're in IT, you may know them. They're a US-based cloud storage and online backup provider, and they have customers from 175 countries and store over 1 exabyte of consumer data, or rather customer data, on their servers. Now, Backblaze has removed, and this is interesting, they've removed a Facebook tracking code, also known as an advertising pixel, that they accidentally added to web UI pages only accessible to logged in customers. Now, this tracking code was inadvertently added with a new Facebook advertising campaign that started on March 8th, according to Backblaze's Senior Director of Marketing. Backblaze then discovered the issue after receiving user reports on March 21st that pages on the B2 web UI were sending file names and sizes to Facebook. Basically, they ended up mistakenly sharing customer backup metadata onto Facebook directly. That's obviously a huge issue. Backblaze has now fixed this, but heads up if you're one of their customers. Moving on, let's talk about the credit card hacking forum, Carding Mafia. They got hacked themselves, exposing almost 300,000 user accounts. According to a data breach notification service, Have I Been Pwned? Truthfully, that probably has my account in there as well, as that's one of the places I go to research. Now, the data breach allegedly exposed the email addresses, IP addresses, usernames, and hash passwords of 297,744 users. Have I Been Pwned announced this basically last Tuesday, saying that the breach happened last week, meaning about a week and a half ago, since I'm sitting here to you on this Sunday. Essentially, this is hacker on hacker crime, and so we're going to see what happens, but obviously there is a ton of criminals, not to mention researchers like myself, that have probably been exposed. Moving on. Let's talk about the Pdi Group. This is an Ohio-based company that manufactures a wide range of ground support equipment for the military. On Tuesday, basically the criminal group behind the Babcock Locker ransomware created basically a page on their leak site for PDI, and they say they've got, they're threatening to leak more than 700 gigabytes of data they claim to have stolen from PDI's internal network, unless the company basically pays them the ransom. To prove their claims, Babcock Locker operators posted a series of screenshots of several internal documents they claim to have stolen from PDI's network, including schematics, one of which appears to describe one of PDI's aircraft engine trailers. And this, for the record, people, is why we are in the process of spinning up the Cybersecurity Model Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, here in the United States for all 300,000 companies in the defense industrial base for the U.S. Department of Defense, so things like this don't happen. Moving on, let's talk about Honeywell. They are an IT giant, industrial IT giant, I should say, or rather tech manufacturer, because on March 23rd, Honeywell revealed that they were under a malware attack. Now, the first-hand account states, basically, of the person that reported this, that the intrusion seems to be was detected in the early stages of the penetration, since only a quote-unquote limited number of IT systems were disrupted. Although the IT services have been restored completely and regular work in the office has apparently resumed, an investigation into the incident is ongoing, and Honeywell was quick basically to disclose that there were no traces of the attackers being successful in exfiltrating any company or customer data. And so here we are, and we'll see as this evolves, because right now they are still going through that investigation, so data may have been compromised, but so far they're saying it's not. Hopefully Honeywell did not get compromised in that way, so heads up if you have anything to do with them. Moving on, let's talk about FBS. They are one of the world's busiest online brokers for foreign exchange or Forex trading. Over 20 terabytes of sensitive customer data has been accidentally leaked online, basically by FBS, after they misconfigured a cloud Elasticsearch database. We're talking full names, email, billing addresses, phone numbers, IP addresses, passport numbers, social media IDs, and ID verification scans, including national ID cards, driver's licenses, bank account statements, utility bills, credit cards, FBS user IDs, unencrypted passwords, I'll say that one again, login history, loyalty data, and password reset links. So if you use FBS, heads up, your data has been exposed. Go change your password and enable multi-factor authentication. Hopefully they have it. Moving on, let's talk about IoT maker Sierra Wireless. They got hit with a ransomware attack on March 20th, and it's currently unknown when their production facilities and other systems will fully return back to normal. But Sierra Wireless believes it has basically addressed the attack and operations will resume soon. So heads up if you have anything to do with IoT maker Sierra Wireless. Moving on. Let's head on down to the country of, or head on over, I should say, because they're not below me, to the country of Israel. Essentially, their voter registration and personal details for millions of Israeli citizens was leaked online Monday, just 2 days before they held their general elections for their unicameral parliament, known as the Knesset or Knesset. And I apologize, my Israeli colleagues here. I do not know how to pronounce that properly. Knesset, I believe, is what it is. Now, the exposed information included the voter registration transaction details of 6,528,565 Israelis and the personal details of 3,179,313 of Israel's estimated 9.3 million total population. So obviously that's a massive amount, over 2/3. Now, for that latter number, details like full names, phone numbers, ID card numbers, home addresses, gender, age, and political preferences were included. A threat actor calling himself or itself the Israeli Autumn took credit for the leak, according to reports from Israeli media, who said they received emails over the past weekend, or rather over this weekend, with links essentially to a ghost bin page hosting this data. Now, since Monday, the data has been basically widely shared on multiple Telegram channels, essentially a haven for this kind of information sharing, as Telegram basically prides itself on security and encryption. So, with that heads up, if you are a voter in Israel. Moving on, let's talk about Aperta, A-P-P-E-R-T-A, Aperta, the Aperta Foundation, which is a UK based nonprofit, and it's supported by NHS England and NHS Digital that promotes open systems and standards in digital health and social care. Now, this week, a British cloud security engineer, Rob Dyke, spoke out on basically an instance of him ethically reporting a data leak that landed him in legal trouble. Now, I find this to be interesting and a little concerning. Kind of want to interview this guy. I'm curious. Now, earlier this month, Dyke had discovered an exposed GitHub repository exposing Aperta's passwords, API keys, and sensitive financial records, which belong to, as I mentioned, Aperta, their foundation. Now, on discovering this GitHub repository, which he basically said was public since at least 2019, he privately reported this to Aperta, and basically they said thanks, but on March 9th, he received legal correspondence from their lawyers, leading him to have to hire his own solicitor to represent them. Furthermore, an email followed the other day from the Northumbria police cyber investigator in relation to a report of computer misuse. This really underscores the old adage of no good deed goes unpunished, and we should basically have an apparatus like outside of HackerOne that understands that, hey, this is a person that's not actually breaking into you. He's saying, hey, you've got a problem, go plug the hole. If anything, that guy should be getting a parade in Aperta's lobby or whatever it is. But heads up, if you have anything to do with Aperta Foundation, your data may have been exposed, and Rob Dyke, good for you for, good on you for exposing this or letting them know in an ethical manner. Moving on, let's talk about Verkada. If you remember, I talked about them, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago, where they got hit and massive corporations from Tesla to government agencies all had to declare breaches because essentially a super admin user was used by these attackers to go ahead and see absolutely everything from all of these video cameras, because that's what Verkada does. So here's an update, because a Swiss hacker who was involved in this intrusion basically has been charged by the U.S. Department of Justice, Verkada is located here, on Thursday with conspiracy, wire fraud, and identity theft. Now, this person is Till Kottman. They're also known as Deletescape online, or Tilly Cremu. Basically, this person is 21 of Lucerne, Switzerland, and also their co-conspirators were accused of hacking dozens of companies and government agencies since 2019, targeting their Git and other source code repositories, basically, and posting this proprietary data of more than 100 entities on a website called git.rip, according to this indictment. Now, Kottman is alleged to have cloned the source code and other confidential files containing hard-coded administrative credentials, access keys, using them to infiltrate the internal infrastructure of victims, further spy and copy records and intellectual property. Additionally, the prosecutors said the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, seized the domain that was used to publish the hack data online. And so we will basically see, I think, this group go down, and as we are incredibly friendly with Switzerland, we'll see what happens with extradition. But that is an update on Verkada. Heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about British fashion retailer Fatface, which, quite frankly, I don't think that name would fly here in the United States. This actually is an interesting one, too, and Fatface is not going to be a fan of me after this. Now, they had a data breach, and they sent notices to their customers, but they added some odd requests to their disclosure email. Now, the subject line read, and I quote, "strictly private and confidential." Also, in the body of this, as they disclose that, hey, we've had a data breach, we don't think, anything was stolen, but they added this line as well, and I quote, "please do keep this email and information included within it strictly private and confidential." Apparently, they didn't want anybody or any news getting out there that they were hit, yet here we are. And so, my UK viewers, heads up to you, and if you work for or have anything to do with Fatface, sorry guys, it's Breaches of the Weekday. Moving on, let's talk about the German parliament, the Bundestag. Basically, they got targeted again by Russian-linked hackers. Now, according to German newspaper Der Spiegel, they revealed that email accounts of multiple members of the German parliament were targeted with a spear phishing attack. Now, these messages were sent by threat actors to the private email addresses of various German politicians. The attackers are suspected to be hackers of the tracked ghostwriter group that works under the control of basically Russia's Military Secret Service, or GRU. At this time, it's not clear if the attackers were able to steal sensitive data during the intrusion. Now, 7 members of the German federal parliament, as I mentioned, the Bundestag, and 31 members of German regional parliaments were hit by this attack, most of them from the CDU, CSU, and SPD parties. Now, Frank Bergman, a spokesman for the Bundestag, basically told the Record that the attack did not impact the infrastructure of the parliament. Once the attack was uncovered, German authorities were notifying the impacted politicians and remediating. So heads up, we may actually see German parliamentary information exposed by Russian-linked attackers. Moving on, let's talk about the California State Controller's Office. A phishing attack last week gave attackers access to email and files. And the source reporting this, according to Brian Krebs of Krebs on Security, the intruders stole several documents with personal and financial data on thousands of state employees, and then used the phished employees' inbox to send targeted phishing emails to at least 9,000 California state workers and their contacts. In a follow-up response to these claims, the SCO, the State Controller's Office, says, quote, its IT security staff were able to determine, based on the same logs that identified the intrusion, that no access was made to any Office 365 files other than the employee's mailbox. And so heads up, residents in the state of California and basically employees of the state of California, you might have been targeted. Moving on, let's talk about Stratus Technologies. They're a well-known provider of high-availability infrastructure products. They suffered a ransomware attack that required systems to be taken offline to prevent the attack spread. And to quote their disclosure, on March 17th, 2021, Stratus Technologies, Inc. was the victim of a ransomware event. Upon detecting suspicious activity, we took several systems offline to isolate the issue and begin to initiate our business continuity plan. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with Stratus Technologies. Moving on, let's head on over to the Netherlands and talk about Dutch Car Owners Rdc, which is a Dutch company that provides garage and maintenance services to Dutch car owners, has confirmed a data breach earlier in the week after the personal and vehicle details of millions of Dutch car owners were posted for sale on a cybercrime forum. Now, this includes basically details such as either the company or individual name, home addresses or business addresses, email addresses, telephone numbers, dates of birth, also vehicle registration numbers, car makes and models, and license plates, and 7.3 million drivers were affected. So heads up if you're in the Netherlands and own a car and use RDC. Moving on, let's head back to the United States and talk about Hobby Lobby. This is the American arts and crafts giant, not without their own controversies in the past, but now we're talking about them because they exposed a large amount of data online, apparently, including customer names, phone numbers, physical and email addresses, and the last 4 digits of payment cards, as well as the source code for the company's app. Now, this data set was as recent as 2020, impacting more than 300,000 users and totaled 138 gig in size. And this is according to the independent and basically anonymous researcher known as Boogeyman, talking to Vice by Motherboard. So heads up, if you shop online or use the Hobby Lobby app, you may be affected. Moving on, let's talk about air charter firm Solarius. aviation. In a data breach announcement on March 23rd, Solaria said aviation business management platform provider Avianis provided a notification basically about their intrusion into Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. I talked about this last week with Avianis, and so air charter, basically the air charter firm Solaris Aviation is the last one up, or the next one up on Avianis. Basically their Azure data breach. I think we're going to see more of those, so heads up if you use Solaris Aviation. Moving on, let's talk about Spargo, Spargo Inc. This is a conference registration vendor, and I think we're going to see a lot more disclosures, but apparently they got hit with ransomware, which included names, addresses, and phone numbers taken possibly from their database. The breach does not appear to have basically had any sensitive information like credit cards or passwords. Clients include major U.S. government agencies, so I think we're going to see more of Spargo sooner than later. Moving on, let's talk about the Department of Health and Human Services for Victoria, Australia. Apparently a former caseworker who was investigated over an alleged sexual abuse offense accessed the sensitive data of vulnerable children for a year after leaving their job. Now, this caseworker has been contacted by Victoria's, basically HHS, between April 2016, or I'm sorry, this person was contracted by Victoria's Department of Health and Human Services between April 2016 and September of 2017 to work for a government program that aims to stop young people from entering out-of-home care. Now, the OVIC, which is the Office of Victorian Information Commissioner, their report found that while this employee was employed by DHSS, the caseworker had access to a government computer system called CRISSP or CRISP, which stores and manages files related to disability, family, and youth support services. This worker's access privileges to CRISP, which should have been revoked when they left the role, were not until October of 2018, when the Australian Department of Justice and Regulation identified that the worker had used CRISP to view information about former and current clients. Now, CRISP access logs revealed that the worker had accessed the information without authorization 260 times between September of 2017 and October of 2018 and performed 150 searches in that system. Among the information accessed by the worker were the personal details of 27 individuals. And so obviously that's a huge breach. We're talking about children. So hopefully Australia will get that cleaned up and prosecute. Moving on, let's talk about Viva Health in Fresno, California. Now, this past Friday, a couple days ago, basically they issued a warning that one of their vendors was the victim of a cyber attack, which would allow attackers to basically download or view data files. That sounds like Accellion, but I cannot confirm that just yet, and so it's very possible I will be telling you about Viva again next week under another disclosure for the Accellion breach, as I mentioned, the University of Miami, Flagstar Bank, etc. today. So heads up to you. Moving on, and we are still going here. Let's talk about Norquest College in Canada. Basically, they warned that the personal information of thousands of students and alumni was potentially leaked in a data breach last month. Now, they said the leak occurred on February 24th, and on that day, a college employee emailed a document with confidential student information to their personal email address and then back to their Norquest account for work purposes. I'm willing to bet that person emailed themselves so they could go home and work and then email it back so they could go home and get it back. This is the problem we have with personal email and all of this, not to mention good cyber hygiene. Norquest College, you need to train your people. I'm sure you're doing that now. So heads up to you if you are a student or alumni of Norquest College in Canada. And finally here, we're going to be talking about an IT contractor, and this is an interesting one. Now, the person is Deepanshu Kerr, and he was sentenced on March 22nd in federal court here in the United States for 2 years in prison for accessing the server of a Carlsbad, California company and deleting over 1,200 of the company's 1,500 Microsoft user accounts in Office 365. Now, according to court documents, Kerr was employed by an IT consulting firm from 2017 through May of 2018. And in 2017, the consulting firm was hired by this Carlsbad company to assist with their migration to Office 365. And in response, they sent Kerr basically to the company's headquarters to assist with the migration. The company ended up being dissatisfied with Kerr's work and relayed their dissatisfaction to the consulting firm soon after Kerr's arrival. In January 2018, the consulting firm then basically pulled Kerr from the company's headquarters. Obviously, if he's dissatisfied, they're going to remove him. And a few months later, on May 4th of 2018, Kerr basically was fired. And then a month after that, in June, he returned to India, where he is originally from. He is an Indian national. Now, on August 8, 2018, 2 months after his return to India, Kerr hacked into the Carlsbad company's servers. I'm guessing he just had the credentials that he had kept, and he deleted 1,200 of their 1,500 accounts. The attack affected the bulk, obviously, of the company's employees and completely shut down the company for 2 days. As the company's vice president of IT explained, the impact was felt inside and outside the companies. Employee accounts were deleted. They could not access their emails, their contact lists, their meeting calendars, their documents, corporate directories, video and audio conferences, virtual Teams environments, that were necessary for them to perform their jobs, and on and on. It is amazing how much of an ecosystem Microsoft Office 365 provides to basically shut you down when you don't have access to it. Now, outside of the company, customers and vendors and consumers were unable to reach company employees. The employees were unable to reach them, obviously, as well. Nobody could inform the buyers what was going on or when the company would be operational again. It was a complete and utter mess. Now, unfortunately, even after those 2 days, the problems remained. Employees were not receiving meeting invites or cancellations. Employee contact lists could not be completely rebuilt, and the affected employees could no longer access folders to which they previously had access. The Carlsbad company repeatedly basically handled multitudes of IT problems for 3 straight months. The vice president of IT closed by saying, quote, "In my 30 plus years as an IT professional, I have never been part of a more difficult and trying work situation." So, in pronouncing his sentence, U.S. District Court Marilyn L. Huff noted that Kerr perpetrated a significant and sophisticated attack on the company, attack which was planned and clearly intended as revenge. In addition to 2 years in custody, Judge Huff sentenced Kerr to 3 years supervised release and restitution to the company of $567,084, the amount the company paid to fix the problem that he had caused. And I think this underscores a couple of different things. One, obviously, as part of the due diligence, if you are going to be firing somebody as a third-party IT company, or if you have your own internal IT staff, you need to make sure that your exit strategy involves changing passwords that this individual may know, especially at an administrative level. Also, making sure that you have good identity management with multi-factor authentication is a good thing as well. But it's also really important, to hire the right people. And you never know when somebody is going to snap, or go off and do something along these lines. But when you are looking at these kinds of things, this is a life-ending event, potentially not just for the 1,500 employee Carlsbad, California company, when their customers are like, well, these people aren't responding, I'm going somewhere else. But it's also possibly life-ending too for that IT company as well. As obviously they are basically having reputation damage issues. So I think this is a huge, huge problem all the way around. But I'm glad to see that this person was sentenced, as significantly as they were for something along these lines, because it's one of those things that good ethics are very important. And when I am actually working with things like universities spinning up cybersecurity programs, as I have with Roosevelt University and some others as well, one of those things I always stress is to teach ethics, because if you're going to start graduating black belts in hacking, the last thing you want them to do are things like this. And so those were your breaches of the week, and this made up for last week. And if this week was a drinking game, I think we'd all be dead. That is your news of the week. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.